something I want to say at the start, and I'm choosing to say it differently today because the reading itself is asking for a different kind of opening, is that the trust placed in this space is not something I take as given. People could be anywhere right now. You chose here. You chose to pay attention to something that most people would dismiss before they'd finished reading the title. And there is something in that choosing, in that refusal to be too sophisticated to take seriously what your intuition keeps directing you toward, that I find genuinely worth honoring. You know how to listen to yourself. That capacity is going to matter enormously for what this reading is about to describe. Now, let's go. Because what's in your field right now arrived with the specific clarifying weight of something that has been in motion for a long time and is finally reaching its moment of contact. Have you ever watched a surveyor work? The actual process, not the result, not the finished map, but the work itself in the field. The way they move through a piece of land with their instruments, stopping at specific points, taking precise measurements, recording what is actually there, regardless of what the previous owner claimed was there, or what the fences suggested, or what the informal understandings between neighbors had produced over years of casual agreement. The surveyor doesn't care about the story. The surveyor cares about the actual boundary, the actual line, the actual measurement of what belongs where, established by law and recorded in a way that supersedes everything else. Something like that is arriving in your life on Monday, not casually, not as an aside or an incidental development or something that can be addressed in a spare moment, something formal, something that carries the weight of systems that exist precisely to cut through the informal arrangements, the convenient fictions, the things that have been allowed to stand because nobody has yet insisted on measuring them properly. A legal energy is moving toward you. And what it carries is not a threat. What it carries is precision. The particular, formal, documented precision of something that is going to establish in terms that cannot be argued with through charm or manipulation or the simple force of someone's will, what is actually true about your situation. I want to show you everything. The first thing that needs to be established is the quality of what's coming, because legal energy in a reading can mean many things, and I want to be specific rather than vague about what I'm perceiving. This is not adversarial, not primarily. There is a legal element approaching you on Monday that is not coming to harm you, not coming as a weapon in someone else's hand, not arriving as something you need to defend yourself against. What I feel in the approach is something closer to the energy of an instrument being used correctly, the law as the thing it's supposed to be, which is a mechanism for clarifying what is actually true and protecting what actually belongs to whom. Something belongs to you that has not been formally, legally, properly acknowledged as yours. It might be material, property, assets, money, a formal right to something tangible that has been in a gray area, understood informally, arranged casually, never quite made concrete in the way that would give it the protection it deserves. It might be less material but equally real, a formal position, a recognition, a status in relation to something or someone that has been operating on assumption rather than documentation. It might be the resolution of something that was left unfinished in legal terms when a chapter of your life closed and that unfinishedness has been quietly sitting in the background, never fully resolved, occasionally surfacing as an unease you couldn't quite name. Whatever it is, the surveyor is arriving, the measurement is being taken, and what is actually yours is about to be established in terms that hold. Let me look at what Monday specifically represents in this reading, because the specificity of that day is doing something I want to honor rather than smooth into a general time frame. There is a quality to Monday as a day that exists independently of the content of what I'm describing. Monday is the day where things that have been suspended over the weekend in courts, in offices, in the formal machinery of institutions that pause for Saturday and Sunday resume, where the instruments come back online, where what was pending becomes active, where the appointments that were scheduled and the decisions that were reached and the documents that were prepared move into the phase of being delivered, enacted, made real. Something has been in preparation. Something has been moving through a process that you may or may not have been fully aware of. Papers drafted, perhaps. Decisions made. Someone in a professional capacity, someone who operates at the intersection of law and the formal establishment of rights and obligations, who has been working on something that has your name in it or your situation at its center, reaching the point where their work is ready to reach you. Monday is when it arrives, and the arriving is not going to be subtle. That's part of what I need to say clearly. This is not the kind of thing that slips in sideways or announces itself quietly in a way that could be missed. The approach of a lawyer with urgent news is, by its nature, a direct and unmistakable contact. The urgency in the title is accurate. There is something time-sensitive in what's being brought, something that requires your attention and your response within a particular window, something that cannot simply be received and filed away for later consideration. You will need to be present for this, actually fully present. Hold on. I need to stay with something that just sharpened in a way I wasn't expecting. There is more than one layer to what's arriving on Monday. I want to say that carefully because I don't want to create confusion, but I also don't want to flatten something that has genuine complexity into a simpler version that misses something important. The surface layer is the formal legal contact, the approach, the news, the document or the conversation or the notification that initiates something that is real, and it is the proximate event. But underneath that surface layer is something that has been engineered, and I'm choosing that word deliberately, by someone whose name may or may not be on the formal documents, but whose fingerprints are on the situation. Someone who has been working in the background to bring about a particular outcome. And that outcome is not what you might initially assume when you hear the word lawyer approaching. There is someone who has been on your side of this, perhaps invisibly, perhaps in a way you haven't fully credited or even known about, who has been using formal mechanisms, legal, institutional, systemic, to protect something of yours or advance something of yours or correct something that was being allowed to remain incorrect for too long. And the arrival on Monday is the arrival of the product of their work reaching you. The news is not only urgent, it is good, not without complexity. I want to hold that with you, because good and complicated can coexist, and this is one of those moments where they do, but good underneath the complexity, good at the root of what's been set in motion, something moving toward resolution rather than toward further complication, something establishing rather than destabilizing. Let that land before I go further. I need to talk about you and your relationship to formal systems, because it's relevant to how you're going to receive what's coming, and I think it deserves some honest attention. Virgo, at the institutional level, operates with a particular quality of thoroughness that is genuinely rare. When you engage with any formal system, bureaucratic, legal, financial, medical, whatever, you do not skim. You read the document. You understand the terms. You notice the clause that everyone else missed. You ask the question that the representative wasn't expecting, and that turns out to be the most important question in the room. You arrive prepared in a way that makes other people feel slightly underprepared by comparison. This capacity has served you well. It is going to serve you specifically and practically in what's coming. But there is a shadow side to this thoroughness that I want to name, because it sometimes creates its own form of paralysis. The capacity to see every implication of every term, to hold every possible outcome in view simultaneously, to map every contingency before committing to a position. That capacity can make decisive action slower than the moment requires, can produce a form of over-processing that delays the clear, confident response that is actually available to you. What is arriving on Monday is going to ask you for a response that is timely, that meets the urgency with its own urgency. That does not defer into the familiar process of reviewing everything from every angle before committing. You will have enough information to respond. Trust that. The detail you haven't reviewed yet, the contingency you haven't mapped, the question you haven't asked, these are not going to be the things that determine the outcome. What determines the outcome is your willingness to step into what is being formally offered to you with the confidence of someone who knows that it belongs to them. Step in. There's something else in this reading that I've been circling, and I want to address it directly because the title promises everything revealed, and I intend to honor that. Someone has been operating in your situation with an incomplete picture of your resources. By resources, I don't mean only material things, money, property, assets, though those may be part of it. I mean the full picture of what you have available to you, what you know, who is in your corner, what documentation exists, what rights have been established even if they haven't been exercised, what formal protections exist around your situation that haven't been activated yet but that are real and available. This person, whoever has been arranging things in a way that assumed your compliance or your ignorance or your inability to respond through formal channels, has been operating on a miscalculation, has been treating your situation as more vulnerable than it actually is, has perhaps been counting on your preference for resolution through relationship rather than resolution through institution, on your natural inclination to prefer the human conversation over the legal mechanism. What Monday reveals is that the legal mechanism has been prepared, is ready, is in fact already in motion in ways that this person did not fully account for. The equalizer has arrived. I want to be careful not to frame this as purely adversarial, because the reading is more nuanced than that. But there is an element here of a power dynamic being corrected, of something that was tilted being leveled, of the formal establishment of where things actually stand, removing the advantage that came from ambiguity or from the assumption that you wouldn't pursue formal clarity. You pursued it, or someone on your behalf did, and it is about to land. Let me look at the period immediately following Monday, because what Monday initiates has a shape that extends beyond the day itself, and I want to give you as complete a picture as I can. There is a process that begins, not a quick one. Formal things rarely resolve quickly, and I'm not going to tell you this is over in a week. What begins on Monday is the beginning of a formal clarification that is going to take the time it takes. And that time frame, while it may require patience, is going to be a time frame in which you are not in the passive position. You are going to be an active participant in something that has your situation at its center, with access to the formal support necessary to navigate it properly. What I feel about the eventual resolution, the landing point of the process that Monday initiates, is something I can only describe as rightness. Not victory in a triumphant sense. Rightness in the sense that the surveyor completes their work and plants the marker, and what was always actually the boundary is now documented and undeniable, and the informal arrangements that we're covering for a different reality no longer have anywhere to stand. What is yours is going to be established as yours in writing, in terms that hold. I want to say something about trust before I close, because it keeps pressing in from the edges of this reading as something that needs to be named. At some point in the recent past, possibly far enough back that you've stopped thinking of it as recent, you made a decision to trust something or someone in a way that turned out to be, at least in part, misplaced. Not entirely. Not in the sense that you were foolish or naive, or that the trust was without any foundation, but misplaced enough that what you were promised and what was actually true turned out to have a gap between them, a gap that has been sitting in the middle of your situation ever since, sometimes dormant, sometimes uncomfortable, always there. What Monday does is address that gap formally, does not allow it to continue being papered over by the good intentions of people who benefited from its existence, does not permit the informal arrangements that covered for it to function as if the gap weren't real. The gap is real, and it is being measured by someone with the appropriate instruments and the appropriate authority to make the measurement mean something permanent. This is not the end of trust as a value. I don't want you to hear this reading and conclude that formal mechanisms are always necessary, that the legal is always superior to the relational, that what's coming is evidence that you should never again extend good faith to anything that hasn't been documented in triplicate. That would be the wrong lesson. The right lesson is more precise, that there are situations where the formal and the relational need to coexist, where good faith requires the support of structure, where trust is not weakened by documentation but actually protected by it. You're going to know that differently after this, in your body, not just in your mind. One last thing, and I want to say it simply and let it stand without elaboration. You are not in trouble. Whatever arrives on Monday, however the initial contact feels in the first moment of receiving it, whatever the urgency of the language, whatever the formality of the approach, you are not in trouble. You are in the process of something being established on your behalf, something being made real and permanent and protected in a way it has not been before. The surveyor plants the marker, not to take something from you, to mark what was always yours. Monday is the marker going in. I want to hear from you in the comments specifically whether there has been something in your situation that has been operating in the gray area I described, something formally unresolved, something that has been arranged informally or assumed rather than documented in a way that has sometimes made you feel more vulnerable than you should have to feel. Because I think what's shifting for Virgo right now is not just the specific events of Monday, but a larger movement toward having your reality formally supported rather than only personally understood. Tell me if this landed. Tell me if there's something you've been waiting to see properly established. And if Monday brings what this reading says it's bringing, come back and tell me. I will be here.